Hi, in this video, I'm going to review how to build your literature review summary for your capstone proposal. So this video will go through sections A and B of the capstone proposal, including the guiding scholarly question and the literature review summary. So I've broken this down into several steps that I think will be a helpful process as you kind of return to your literature review that you started building in OTD 772, as well as kind of taking stock of what's been happening with your capstone since you worked on that literature review. So the first step I would recommend is to take a look at your scholarly question and ask yourself a couple questions. Based on kind of everything that's happened with your capstone since last spring, do you feel like you need to make edits based on how things have developed? More specifically, are there settings, populations, concepts, interventions, or outcomes that you know will be part of your capstone that it would be important to include in your question and your literature review? So, really thinking about how things have developed, what your site is going to look like, and are there ways to make your question more specific or focus it in on certain elements that will be most beneficial? And lastly, this can be a great opportunity to check in with your site and particularly whoever's going to be your site mentor or your content expert and ask them if they have any feedback on your question. You know, are there suggestions they have on ways to make it the most relevant for your upcoming capstone work? So again, first step I think is to take a look at your scholarly question and make any edits you may need to. Second, I would recommend, digging up your literature review from OTD 772, and going through it and really taking a look at, particularly based on, updates to your question, that sort of thing. What is the most relevant, parts of your literature review that relate to kind of where your capstone is now and where your question is now? On the flip side of that, what is missing from your literature review that would help you prepare for your capstone? So, at the end of the day, this literature review provides an introduction to your capstone proposal and is really meant to help prepare you to build your capstone proposal and have a knowledge base for when you start implementing your capstone. So, what sorts of information would be really helpful for you to look into in order to feel prepared and like you have a solid knowledge base? So after you've kind of thought about, what you can transfer over, what's most relevant, and then what is missing, thinking about what search strategies and synthesis needs to be done to kind of reflect these changes. So after you've kind of come up with a plan, and everyone will kind of be in different places. Some people may have a very similar question to what they had last year. Other people may have had to make larger pivots. So this can look quite different for different people, but good to kind of take stock of the work you did last year and figure out what you can bring forward for this year. Step three is then using kind of some of those tools that we've used in other classes. So the capstone preparation classes like 771 and 772, and your evidence-based practice courses in particular. So, do you need to update your keywords and your research databases? So, do you need to make updates to your audit trail, basically? And you're welcome to use these forms and templates that you've used in other classes to help you organize, these edits that you're going to be making. Similarly, if you have new literature that you're adding or, different keywords and coming up with different research articles, what themes and literature characteristics are emerging from your updated search? So this may be helpful to go to your review matrix or your synthesis matrix and make some updates to that. You do not need to resubmit your audit trail, your review matrix, or your synthesis matrix. But again, these can be really helpful tools to help you, again, go back to your literature review and update it. So after you've made those updates, you can write up your literature review summary. So there are a couple different sections that are on the proposal template that I've also identified here that will help you structure your literature review summary. So each of these, the first four bullets are kind of the different sections. Each of these could be about, half a page or so. Could be a little bit more or less. The 1 to 2 page is just a guideline to help give you some scope of the amount of information. So it is meant to be brief, a summary, that sort of thing. But again, if it's a little bit longer, particularly, that is totally fine. So what you want to do when you write up your summary is first present the background of the issue as it relates to the community, profession, and society. So identify kind of the scope of the issue. This could be any background statistics, that sort of thing. But why is this topic important? Why is it important to the communities it impacts? Why is it important to OT as a profession and broader society? Then you want to communicate the search strategies you used to find the literature review articles. So this includes the keywords that you used, the databases that you searched, any inclusion or exclusion criteria, and how many, articles are included in your literature review. So again, a very brief kind of summary of your audit trail. This third bullet here, then you're going to present an analysis and synthesis of the current related literature to date. So you'll take the themes that you've identified and any other sort of analysis and summarize that. That's probably going to be your biggest section. And then at the end, you really want to summarize to help readers understand the gaps in the literature and how that connects to your capstone and why there's a need for your specific capstone. So that's a good way to kind of wrap it up and summarize it. Again, this section provides kind of an introduction for your whole proposal, so it's really valuable to provide a really solid argument as to why you're proposing to do what you're going to do for your capstone. This last bullet here is just really valuable to think about in for the literature review is that making sure any terms that you're going to use, particularly if they're used frequently throughout the rest of your proposal, they're really central to your capstone work, making sure that they're well defined. Meaning, so that we all know kind of what you're talking about when, for example, you're talking about trauma-informed care, right? Or what do you mean when, you're talking about sensory processing interventions, that sort of thing. So making sure that some of these terms, it's very clear what you're talking about, particularly if you're going to be using these terms frequently throughout your capstone work. Some other information to keep in mind as you're building your literature review summary is to make sure you're using APA formatting for in-text citations and references. For your capstone proposal, you may have a reference section, so the full references at the end of each section that requires citations, or you could have a large comprehensive list of references at the end of your proposal. Really up to you about how you'd like to organize it. For your literature review summary, you can use a narrative format. You can use an infographic, a link to a recorded presentation. So these are all modes that people used for their literature reviews in 772. So you can transfer those modes over, or, if you decide you would rather do something a little bit different, that's totally fine. Does not have to be just written text. However, you do want to make sure that all the content that is on the proposal and in this presentation is covered. So you do still want to make sure it's a comprehensive summary, regardless of the format that you choose to use. And again, really important just to keep in mind that this literature review summary is really meant to introduce your capstone and also make sure that you have a solid knowledge base on your topic so that you're able to build a solid proposal and feel confident going into the implementation phase. So, really think about how you can best prepare yourself, what sort of information you need to be researching to kind of get to that place. There's also another video about capstone questions and how they tend to evolve throughout the capstone process. So I'd recommend checking out that video if you'd like a little bit more information about things to think about with your guiding scholarly question for your capstone. All right, thanks.